seconds. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to TY Hub Let's Talk podcast, and we're live again this morning. We're joined by Finn and Nadia, both from the RNLI. How's it going where you both are today?
I'll let Nadia kick it off.
Nadia, morning from the sunny southeast. Lovely sunny day here, and we're looking forward to talking all things water safety.
Thanks, Nadia. I'm Finn Mullen, and I'm based up in Bundoran, South Donegal, so up in the top left of the island. And I'm Education Manager for the RNLI and Water Safety, and Nadia also is my colleague in Water Safety who handles all our delivery support stuff. So we're going to run today for an hour, guys. If we could, if you can type in the chat the name of your school, the county that you're from, and the approximate number of people that are viewing. We'll not hold you to any decimal points, but just a rough number for our own records. So we'll kick on, and you've got the next hour or so with us. There's just the admin side again. Just if you can type in your school name, county, and approximate number of pupils. If you keep your mics on mute, any questions, pop them in the chat. Fiona was kindly sharing with me some of the questions that we've had previously, and we'll leave some time at the end to run through those. There's no recording today, so you don't have to worry if you haven't got your favorite shirt on. So we're going to be covering cold water shock, our float to live message, when it's safe to swim, cliff and pier jumping, how to call for help. Okay. So quick introduction to the RNLI. This is the sort of lifeboats that you'll see around the coast. On the far right, we've got our Atlantic 85. It's the fastest boat in the fleet, and that kind of covers our inshore work and a little bit further offshore. Over on the left here, you've got our little D class, which is the smallest lifeboat in our fleet, and Nadia is actually a crew member on her local lifeboat down in Fethard there. That's what they have. And then you see the likes of our all-weather boats, which we have two of in Dublin and sort of the major ports around the coast, on our islands as well. They can work further offshore. The D classes, that's what I call proper lifeboat, and they do all the tricky stuff really close to shore. It's a brilliant, very maneuverable, can work well in the surf, as can the B class here. These also, the B class, they operate inland, so on our stations on Lough Erne, Upper and Lower, and Lough Ree and Lough Derg. We are a charity. My colleague always has a saying that lifeboats are fueled by donations, not by petrol or diesel. And you can see that our aim is to have like a ring of safety all around the UK and Ireland. Okay, and as I said, we're all over the coast and inland as well, in Lough Erne and in Lough Ree and Lough Derg. So we're going to get into the thrust of it here. We've got beautiful weather at the minute, and a fun fact that I always like to share with people on days like today is we get more incidents when the weather is good than when the weather is bad. So I guess the Hollywood image of lifeboating is that we're going out there in all weathers and stormy seas, and of course we do that sometimes, but the most incidents of water related accidents happen when there's good weather, because everyone wants to get in the water when the weather's good. But the problem, especially this time of year, is the water is still cold. All right. So we'll talk about some of the ways that you can help keep yourself safe. Why is this relevant to you? Well, globally, under 25s account for the largest group of by age of people that drown. So much so the World Health Organization has made it a priority of drowning prevention in young people across the world. It's not just a problem in the UK or Ireland, but broadly on these two islands, we have some similar themes. And that is most drownings occur inland. So again, maybe not what you may stereotypically think, that the large surf, which we have plenty of here in Donegal, and all down the wild Atlantic Way. The most drownings actually happen on our lakes, our rivers, our canals, and quarry pits, which of course are really, really dangerous for many reasons, which I'll kind of cover later. Also, we know that people from inland that visit the coast tend to get in trouble more than people that live on the coast. We also know that people that can swim, end up in trouble more than people that can't, because generally people who can't swim don't enter the water. We also know that males are disproportionately affected. Okay, so more males have drowning incidents. We also know that all of these incidents can actually be prevented. And whilst our technology that we use in drowning prevention has massively increased over the years, so our lifeboats have all the latest GPS navigation. They're much, much safer than they were 200 years ago. But over the course of the 200 years that we've been in existence, the reasons that people drown haven't really changed. Okay, so there's some very basic steps that you can take to help keep you safe and to help others if you see them in trouble, which we'll talk about over the next hour or so. So that just gives you a little bit of context as to why it's brilliant that we get to talk to you here today. We absolutely love to see people enjoying the water. We don't want to see people stop enjoying the water, but you can have fun and stay safe at the same time. Like, the two things aren't exclusive. But what we always kind of say to you is take that moment for safety before you go in the water, because it will save you a lifetime of regret, whether you suffer a serious injury or worse, to your friends, to your family. If in doubt, don't go out. That's a really, really simple, catchy phrase to remember when you're at the coast or the river or at the lake. If for any reason your mind is telling you, don't go in the water today, don't go in. Because when we look back at incidents, it's primarily because people have underestimated the conditions. So underestimate maybe the flow of the river, or underestimate the power of the waves that are crashing onto the shore. And they overestimate their ability. So they think that they can swim better than they can. They think that they can swim longer. They think that they can swim farther. Okay, so remember, swimmers are the people that are getting in trouble more than non-swimmers. But interestingly, on this island, when we look at incidents that have occurred, most of the incidents don't come from extreme activities. They come from relatively benign activities. So the number one reason that people are drowning on this island, the preceding activity has been walking, running, foraging, or shoreline fishing. None of these things are very extreme sports. And remember too, that when we look at the data, we can see that the people who ended up drowning, the majority of them, over 50%, didn't even expect to get in the water that day. They went out for a walk by the beach, by the river, by the lake. They didn't even expect to get wet, but they somehow ended up in the water, and they unfortunately weren't able to survive. But we're going to teach you the skills to avoid all that kind of trouble. So what are some of the risks you need to think about? Well, we break it down into three different categories. Environmental, so you're thinking about the wind strength. Swell, you can see the picture of the big wave at the top there. That's pretty obvious. Rips, we'll talk a little bit about that later on. So those are rip currents that can potentially drag you out to sea. Currents, okay, so there can exist tidal currents. Tides, we'll talk about that later on as well. And weather. So is it going to be foggy? Is there going to be thunder or lightning? All of these things really, really become important at the coast or at the rivers or the lakes, because they can affect your ability to survive. So those are the sort of things you always need to be thinking about before you go into the water. Your physical side of things, your fitness, your ability, Remember, we talked about people overestimating their ability, your health. Okay, so when we talk about that, it's not just underlying medical conditions that you know about. There might be some that you don't know about that the cold water can trigger. So that's why you're always going to err on the side of caution. Similarly, if you've got a bit of a headache, you're not feeling 100%, on land, if you're doing your sport, that's not so much of an issue. If something happens, you can step off the pitch, the running track, take a break, all right? Go get changed, go home. When you're in the water and you become tired, or you get a cramp, or you're not feeling 100%, almost immediately that becomes life-threatening. So there's a big difference in your body's ability to survive on land and in water. In water, you need everything working 100%. On land, you can get away with a little bit less than that. The mental side of things, so poor judgment. So all of this comes into your decision-making process when you're thinking about the weather, you're thinking about your own health, how you feel on the day, weighing those things up as to make a good decision whether to enter the water or not. Overconfidence, again, we talked about it. Peer pressure, come on, go for a swim. Oh, don't be checking it out. Okay, always listen to your little inner voice, because when we look at the history of incidents that have happened, it's people that have ignored that little inner voice in their head that have ended up in trouble. Those instincts are going to what keep you alive. Remember, open water, so by that we mean the sea, rivers, lakes, quarries, canals. They're not swimming pools. Okay, swimming pool is a very, very controlled environment. Open water has many more variables in it. There's also not lifeguards all the time as there are in swimming pools. There isn't easy walls to climb out of the pool and steps. There isn't a nice warm temperature. So it's okay to go every Friday at 3 o'clock for your swim at the local pool, but it's not okay to think that every Friday at 3 o'clock, the beach, the river, or the lake is going to be fit for swimming. That's a dynamic assessment you have to make each time. And you're going to do that with good planning and good judgment on the day. So we talked about swimming. The easy way to stay safe when you're swimming is wear a wetsuit, because year round on our island, we have what we call cold water. Medically, cold water is anything less than 15 degrees. And we have less than 15 degrees on our sea and on our rivers and our lakes year round. So the wetsuit gives you warmth, and it also gives you a bit of buoyancy. Really good tip is wear a brightly colored hat. Okay, orange or pink are the best if you're doing that open water swimming, which has become really, really popular around the coast. But as such, has become a big cause of our call-outs around the coast. And on lakes, it's really popular inland too. The same rules apply. If you wear a brightly colored hat, not only can people see you, so they're able to spot if you're in trouble, emergency services can see you, so the helicopters, the lifeboats, but also other boat users. It's really, really hard to see somebody in the water from a boat. But if you're wearing a bright hat, it makes it so much easier. Take a tow float with you. That's if you don't know what those are, these are these little orange inflatables. They're about the size of a small backpack, and you wear them around the waist and they're towed behind you. Okay, the reason for that is not only does it increase your visibility, but if you get tired for whatever reason, or you're suffering some sort of medical event, you can pull it close to you, hang on to it, get your breath back, helps keep you floating. If you don't think that you're able to continue on your swim, you can hang on to that, raise one hand above your head, signal for help, and shout for help. What is the best way of getting help to you is to always have a means of calling for help on you, like a mobile phone in a waterproof pouch, or a whistle to attract attention. Okay, when you're using those mobile phones in the waterproof pouch, remember to have your phone fully charged, so in the event of an emergency where you're maybe having to stay on the line for a while, or you're having to use those further away signals that are at the coast, You've got loads of battery time in your phone. But also an easy way to call 999 or 112 on the latest Android phones is to hit the power button 5 times in quick succession. Apple phones are slightly different. It depends on the model and the iOS that you've got installed, but they do have a similar feature. Why is that important? Because whenever you're in that emergency situation, you might find it hard to use the screen pad when it's in that waterproof pouch. You might be losing dexterity in your fingers because of the cold. So knowing that shortcut to call 999 or 112 on your phone can be really, really useful. And it's also a handy one for your own personal safety. Say you're on a night out, you're feeling threatened for whatever reason, the phone's in your pocket, hit the power button 5 times quick succession on an Android, and it'll automatically call 999 112. When you use that tow float, we want you to put your phone number on it and also your in case of emergency contact number. So your ICE number, you might hear some people call it. The reason for that is if your tow float blows away, and you can do this with any of your equipment, canoes, paddle boards, whenever that is loose in the water or washes up, if there's no person attached to the tow float or there's no person attached to the paddleboard or canoe, we immediately assume the worst and we start a search. Now, that search may be for a completely innocent reason, that the canoe has just broke free, the tow float is just blown away. And the way that we can ascertain if it's a false call or not is we'll call the numbers on there. So first of all, we'll call your number. If we get no reply, we then can call your emergency contact number. And your emergency contact might be, oh yeah, sorry, sure. They've fallen asleep after going swimming there, and yeah, their tow float blew away. That's why it's so important to have both those numbers on there. So we talked about checking your spot before you go. You're always going to check the weather, principally looking for that wind strength. Anything above moderate is not a good idea to go to the coast and have an activity, all right? Because the wind can blow you offshore. If it's blowing onshore, it might set up waves that you're not used to. If it's blowing cross shore, it'll blow you away from where you set off. The other things you're going to think about, like I said, is if there's fog, because obviously fog, if that descends, makes it really hard to find the shore again. Thunder and lightning all become quite critical whenever you're at sea. You don't have any cover to retreat to. You also think about, like, if there's heavy rainfall, that means like the rivers are running faster. Where those rivers are entering the sea, it can also mean that there's a lot of washout on the shore, so the water quality will be worse. So it's never really a good idea to go swimming at the coast in periods of high rainfall, because the water quality, the storm overflow drains empty straight out to sea. Rivers run faster. So those are the sort of things think about whenever you're checking the weather. Check the surf forecast if you're running around the coast, okay? See if there's large waves forecast. Always check the tide times, okay? And we'll talk about the tides a little bit later on. But you're also going to be looking out for what we call rip currents. These are the currents that drag people out to sea. If anyone watches Bondi Rescue, you'll always see the backpackers rip, they call it. And unfortunately, they normally have an Irish tourist being dragged out there. But it's a good reminder that everything we teach you today applies whenever you're on holiday, okay? The water may be warmer, so it reduces that cold water shock risk, but everything else still exists if the sun's out and the water's warm. So rip currents can occur on any beach around the world. The way that you can identify a rip current is, first of all, look to see is there any signs. My local beach in Bundoran here, unfortunately, is one of the deadliest beaches in Ireland. We've had a lot of drowning incidents here because people get dragged out in the rip currents. And despite there being loads of signs everywhere telling you where the rip currents are and where the safe places are to swim, people still get in trouble because they don't read the signs. Okay, if there's no signs, the easy way to spot a rip current is if there's a period of flat water in between the breaking waves. Okay, so this is where, again, like what we talked about earlier, you have to sort of flip the script a bit on what you might think is the stereotype of where the safe place to swim is. If you're at a surf beach and you see periods of flat water in between the waves, that is not the safest place to swim. The reason why the waves aren't breaking in that area is because the rip current is so strong running out to sea, it stops the waves breaking. So most people get into trouble because when they walk down the beach, they see an area of the beach which has no waves and immediately assume, well, that must be the safest place to swim, and they immediately get sucked out. Remember, people don't die because they get sucked out to sea. People die in rip currents because they try and swim back to shore. So never, ever try and swim back to shore. Rip currents only exist in finite areas, finite channels. So if you're getting dragged out, you've got two options. Either go with the rip current, because they generally stop behind where the waves are breaking. Wait there, don't try and swim back to shore. Float on your back, raise one hand up in the air, shout and signal for help. Wait, floating on your back until help arrives. If you feel like you're able, if you swim to the side, left or right, it doesn't matter, the waves will push you back to the shore. So as you're getting dragged out, swim parallel to the shore. Only if you think you're able, then the waves will push you back to shore. So we'll run through a little recap of the rip current again. As you're getting dragged out, you've got two choices. Just go with the rip current, lying on your back, one hand up in the air, shouting and signaling for help, or swim parallel to the shore, left or right, it doesn't matter. If you feel when you're in standing depth in the water, the rip current tugging on your feet, remember, stay calm. If you're still in knee depth, waist depth, you can walk out, okay? You can walk back to the beach. The rip current hasn't swept you off your feet yet. What a lot of people get into trouble with is whenever they're just in that shallow water, they begin to feel the rip current tugging at their feet. They panic. That means that they fall into the water and they can't then stand up and walk themselves out. The easy way to always stay safe at the beach is go to a lifeguarded beach and swim between the red and yellow flags. And you can find out where your local lifeguarded beach is by going onto your county council website, contacting the local council. They'll tell you where your lifeguard beaches are. Sometimes they have it on their website. Or if you go to Irish Water Safety's website, they've got the list of all the lifeguarded beaches around the country. Typically, they operate in weekends in June, full time in July and August, and normally from around 10 a.m. to 7 p.m. That's the easy way to stay safe. The lifeguard's job is to monitor the beach, see where the rip currents are on the day, and they set up the flags appropriately. The rip currents might move throughout the day, so you might see them adjusting the flags, but if you always swim between the red and yellow flags, you'll always be safe. If there's red flag flying, don't go swimming. Okay, one of the other risks that we talk about was tides. And a big problem that we have with rescues for the lifeboats is what we call tidal cutoff. And this occurs both on our west coasts and on our south coast, but a lot of the time on our east coast beaches. So those Dublin beaches, which for anyone that doesn't know, Dublin has some really beautiful beaches. We're really lucky on this island. Our capital city has such ready access to the water and beautiful beaches to go for a walk on. So where do people get into trouble? Well, if you look at the top slide here, this is an island off the south coast of England. Everyone goes for their walk at low tide, so they'll go down to the beach and they see a rocky outcrop or a lovely beach stretching off into the distance, and they go, right, I'm going to go for a big, long walk. They walk out to the island, the rocks, the other end of the beach, whatever it is, have their rest, picnic, little bit of fun, go to turn around, and the tide has come in, and that causeway, path, or stretch of beach that you have been walking on is now covered with water. Now, the only way that you're going to get back to where you started from is to swim that distance. And not a lot of people are normally prepared to swim or able to cover that distance. At that point, they ring 999 or 112, and the helicopters and the lifeboats launch to come get you. Now, that is very preventable. We're always going to come get you. The helicopters are always going to come get you. But remember, when we're tied up rescuing people who've been cut off by the tide, our resources are being used away from someone who might have a more pressing emergency down the coast. All because somebody didn't check the tide times. Tides are very, very predictable. The weather isn't so predictable. Okay, generally our weather forecasts are only valid for a few days in Ireland. But tides, we know the tides every single day for the rest of the year and into next year. They're very, very predictable. Tides are controlled principally by the moon, the gravitational effect of the sun and the moon. The moon is closer, there's less gravitational force, but because it's closer than the sun, it exerts more of an influence. What do we know about the moon? The moon changes every day. Sometimes we have a full moon, new moon. Sometimes we have what we call a half moon, banana moon. The moon's waxing or waning. The moon changes every single day, as you know, when you see it up in the sky each night. So because the position of the moon relative to the earth changes every day, naturally the tides change every day because the moon's gravitational force affects the tides. So how do we find out what the tides are doing? Well, where do we get most of our information these days? It's off the internet. So if you want to Google Dublin tides, Sligo tides, Cork tides, Galway tides, you'll see tide times and the tide heights. So we have 2 high tides a day, 2 low tides a day, and you'll see the times and the heights. Why are the heights important? Well, if you look at this picture, if we look at this pier here, you'll see that photo's taken at low tide. This is the photo at high tide. So the safest time, if you want to go jumping off anything into the water, is always going to be at high tide. Remember, before you jump into the water, you're always going to check the depth underneath you. Make sure there's enough water. Make sure there's no obstructions, because people have suffered very, very serious injuries when they've hit something that's been submerged under the water. How are you going to check the depth? You're not just going to look over the side to see, because the way that light bends through water can be very distorting. Okay, you have to physically check it, all right? Maybe you're lowering down the steps on the ends of piers, you're lowering down into the water to see what depth it is beneath it. Maybe you're using a long stick or an oar or a pole to check the depth underneath and scouting around for any submerged objects. Remember, at lakes and rivers, though they don't have tides, the water levels can increase or decrease depending on the amount of rainfall that we've had. So loads of rain, there'll be more water. The lakes could be deeper. If we've had really good weather, that water will evaporate off. So the lakes and riverbanks can be shallower. Lakes and rivers can be dangerous because their depth varies so much. Generally, riverbanks get deep almost straight away. Lakes, it can be a bit more of a mixed bag. Most shorelines get gradually deeper. Okay, it's not the same. Some get really steep really quickly. The point being, you just have to check the depth every single time, wherever you're going swimming. I said the tide times change every day. They generally advance by an hour each day, roughly. So the high tide today in the northwest is around 12 o'clock midday. So tomorrow it'll be around 1 o'clock. So bear in mind, if you go swimming at high tide today at 12 o'clock, if you go tomorrow 3 o'clock in the afternoon, it's not going to be high tide, okay? Tide's going to be on the drop. The fastest point of the tide is always mid-tide. So that's the riskiest time to go for your walk on an incoming mid-tide, because the tide will be flooding in around you. Like I said, if you go to a lifeguarded beach, they have the tide times all up there, and that's the easy way to always stay safe. Stay within that patrolled area. Okay. One of the reasons that people drown running and walking, shore fishing and foraging, very, very innocent activities, is because when they fall into the water unexpectedly, like the majority of people do, the effects of cold water shock overwhelm them, and they overwhelm them within 2 to 3 minutes. So people that drown in can drown very close to the shore, typically 2 to 3 meters away from the shore. Remember, the most people that are drowning are actually swimmers. So why is it? It's this effect of cold water shock. Somebody that's young, able to swim, is still drowning really close to shore and in a very short space of time. It's due to that cold water effect. If you remember, when you get into the shower expecting a load of hot water, you get dosed with a load of cold because somebody has used up all the hot water. It's not very pleasant. You take that sharp intake of breath and you quickly jump out of the shower. The problem is when you fall into the river, the lake, or the sea unexpectedly, and that cold water is surrounding you, you don't have it so easy to just step out of the water. It sets up this gasp reflex. We all have it in us. So immediately your breathing, normal breathing cycle's interrupted. It leads to a rise in your heart rate. It leads to a rise in your blood pressure. And all of that quite quickly leads in an inability to swim. If you can't swim, you can't survive. But we have a way that you can survive. And it's what we call float to live. It's where you roll over onto your back, lean your head so far back that your ears are wet, put your arms out, your legs out. We say to the little kids, be like a starfish. Use your hands, lightly moving them to help you keep stable. Stay in that position for typically 60 to 90 seconds until you get your breath back. If it takes longer, stay in that position. Everyone's different. The reason why it's so effective is because it lets you get your breathing under control, but it also uses very little energy. You've got to fight your instinct to thrash around. Remember, it's a little bit like riptides. One of the reasons that people drown is because, as they do in riptides, they try and swim against the current. It tires them out really quickly. When people are in that cold water scenario, they go into that fight or flight mode. So they thrash around. They're trying to fight the effects of the cold water, which is overwhelming them. But that all is a vicious cycle that can end up tiring you very quickly. So just stay on your back until you feel that breathing get under control, relax, use as little energy as possible. If after 60, 90 seconds, you feel like you're able to swim back to shore, swim back to shore. Because remember, people are drowning really close to shore, within that 2 to 3 meter range. If you don't think that you're able, stay in that position. Use one hand to help you stay afloat and raise the other hand above your head, signaling for help and shouting for help. Remember that shouting for help, because when people are drowning, they tend to panic, and that sense of panic overwhelms them so quickly, tiring them out, but it also makes them forget to shout for help. Now you know that skill. If you see someone in trouble, you can tell them what to do. Roll over onto your back, head so far back that your ears are wet, arms out, legs out, lightly moving your hands, stay in that position for 60, 90 seconds, swim to shore then if you think you're able. If not, raise one hand above your head and shouting, signaling and shouting for help. Now, we talked about a little bit earlier on why people get into trouble is they overestimate their ability. Men are predominantly the ones that are getting in trouble because they like taking risks. So why do we take risks? Well, it can be to look cool, impress our friends. They're bored. You want a photo on Facebook, all of these things. And we talk about risk versus reward. So low risk is going paddleboarding, surfing, tombstoning with an improved instructor. Okay? That way, they've looked at all the weather conditions, made an assessment, know it's safe, but you get all the benefits. You have a great day surfing, you have a great day jumping off the rocks, you have a great day paddleboarding. Okay, so it's low risk, but high reward. An example of high risk, low reward is jumping off a pier or a cliff that you know nothing about what's underneath you, and you end up with a very serious injury or worse. And the reward was just you look cool in front of your friends. All right, so it's just weighing up that risk versus reward. And there is easy ways, like I said, go with an approved activity provider. That'll really cut down the risk. An example here of a story in the news about a young student who's on holiday. Remember, everything we teach you today applies if you're on holiday as it does in Ireland. He dived into the water, hit a rock, and was left paralyzed waist down for the rest of his life. It wasn't the life that I planned, he said, but it's the life that I have. This guy's actually become a really popular motivational speaker because he went on to finish his degree, has become a real advocate of overcoming whatever adversity you have in your life. Here we have an example of two boys who went swimming, teenagers, in one of our heat waves in September, October, which we frequently seem to have every year now. Jumped into the lake. One of them got into trouble. The other one went to help, but ended up in trouble himself. And that accounts for about 42% of drownings worldwide, what we call double drownings. So the person that was in trouble, someone jumps in to try and save them. We're going to teach you the ways that you can avoid risk to yourself to save someone's life. Never, ever enter the water unless you're a trained professional like a lifeguard or a lifeboat person. The easy way, like I said, now you know float to live, you can teach someone float to live. Roll over onto your back and float. But always the first thing that you're going to do is call 999 or 112. Never enter the water. While you're waiting for the emergency services to arrive, you can throw them anything that floats. And we'll talk a little bit about that later on. So popular activity around the coast is stand-up paddleboarding. The easy way to stay safe with that is always wear a buoyancy aid. Have a means of communication. Again, that phone in a waterproof pouch and have it on you. Never go alone. That applies to all our water activities. Because if you're on your own and you get into trouble, there's nobody there to call for help. Paddleboarding, we always say wear the correct leash. So the leash is a line that connects you to the board. Okay, and when the next slide will tell you which type of leash to use in which situation. Always check the weather, always check the tides. So sup leashes, you've got three types, one that attaches to your waist, one that attaches to your calf, and one attaches to your ankle. Where there's a risk of entrapment, so if there's a load of pot buoys, if there's anything that can get tangled around your sup leash, like an anchor chain, you always wear a waist leash. All right, that way it can be disconnected quickly. If it's just in the surf and there's no things that are going to entangle between you and the board and the leash, you can just wear an ankle leash or a calf leash like you would when you're regular surfing. Now, why has paddleboarding become a topic for lifeboating? Well, alongside its rise in popularity, we've had a rise in call-outs. And the most famous one on this island is these two young women who were blown offshore in Galway Bay and spent 15 hours at sea on their paddleboards, clinging to a pot buoy and famously singing Taylor Swift songs to each other to help keep their morale up until they were rescued in the early hours of the morning the following day. So what did they do wrong? They didn't check the weather forecast looking for those offshore winds. So this part of Galway Bay that they launched from faces west. So an east wind is going to blow offshore. Remember, offshore winds are always going to be opposite to the direction you're facing. So if you're on a north coast beach facing north, a south wind's going to be offshore. If you're on the east coast facing beach, a west wind's going to be offshore. If you're on the south facing beach, a north wind's going to be offshore. They didn't check the weather forecast, so didn't appreciate that as soon as they launched, they'd start getting blown offshore. They didn't have that means for calling for help on them. So as they began drifting offshore, they'd no means of raising the alarm. Kayaking, again, really popular activity. Love to see people kayaking. And the way that you can do it safely is have your buoyancy aid, your means of communication, your mobile phone, that waterproof pouch. Again, making sure you keep it on you. Don't have it on the paddleboard. Don't have it in the compartment on the kayak. Have it on you, around your neck, okay? Tucked in onto your buoyancy aid on your wetsuit. Never go alone. Always check the weather and the tides. So we talked about it earlier on, calling for help. If you see someone in trouble, always call 999 or 112 and ask for the Coast Guard and call early. If you yourself are in trouble, remember, you've got your phone in your waterproof pouch, call 999 or 112. Remember that quick trick about doing it by hitting the power button 5 times in quick succession. If you've got no signal, so I'm with Vodafone. If there's no Vodafone signal, still call 99 or 112 because you'll see your phone is saying emergency calls only. It'll look for any other carrier to make the call. There's some apps that you can download. RYA Safe Tracks app if you're in the UK, or Irish Sailing Safe Tracks in Ireland. That's on their websites. Those apps will log your position, and in the event of an emergency, we can access that positional data and try and find where you are. But the easy way for us to know where you are is always tell somebody where you're going and when you'll be back, okay? That way, if you're overdue, we know where to start the search area. Whenever you call 99 or 112, they're going to ask you principally 3 questions: who, what, and where. So who's in trouble, the number of people that's in trouble, what are they wearing, what are they doing, and where. That's the really important one. So always be able to give like an air code, an address, or be able to describe your position in relation to a prominent landmark. Okay, it's not like Hollywood. We can't always track where your phone is. Still, the best way is for you to be able to tell us where you are. If you're calling for 999 112 after seeing someone in trouble, you're going to use a life ring or anything that floats to throw to the person to help them float or pull them back to shore. Principally around the coast, the rivers and the lakes, you'll see ring buoys, life buoys, and Water Safety Ireland has a website for reporting if you see one missing. Fiona's been in touch with some of you guys that are going to do an exercise to plot where your nearest life rings are. So how do you use a life ring? Well, first of all, you always want to protect yourself. So stand 1 meter back from the edge. Tell the person what you're going to do. So stay calm. I've called 999, 112, help is on its way. Roll over onto your back and float. I'm going to throw you the life ring. When you get a hold of it, stay on your back and I'm going to pull you back to shore. Okay, so let them know what you're going to do. When you throw that life ring, you're going to aim to throw it behind them, above and behind. Okay, that way you can pull it towards them. Don't throw it in front of them because remember, they're drowning, they can't swim. Don't throw it at them. They're already having a bad day drowning. If you hit them on the head with a life ring, they're definitely going to have a bad day. Remember, before you throw it, you're always going to hold the end of the rope. The instructions are always going to be on a life ring or throw bag. Sometimes you see a coil of rope in a bag. The instructions are always going to be on it, and it's always hold the end of the rope before you throw it. So either hold it in your hand or trap it underneath your feet, making sure there's no coils of rope that you're going to get entangled with. Again, throw it past the casualty, then you can pull it towards them and then pull them back to shore. Always try and make sure there's people around that can help you. Don't ever endanger yourself by leaning over the edge, trying to pull them in. okay, you've always got to stand back 1 meter from the edge. Try and get some help to help you pull that rope in. Again, just a little slide demonstrating that you throw it underarm. So recap our points. If you see someone in difficulty in the water, always phone 999 or 112 immediately. You'll never get in trouble for calling that number if there's a genuine reason that you think the person is in trouble. The operator at the other end of the line will make that judgment call as to whether someone requires assistance or not. You don't have to make that decision. Use your voice contact to explain how to float. So recapping again, you lie on your back, head right back so that your ears are wet, arms out, legs out, lightly moving your hands for stability. Stay in that position for 60 to 90 seconds until you get your breath under control. Fight that instinct to thrash around. If you think you're able at that point, swim to shore. If not, stay in that position. One hand helping you float, the other hand above your head, signaling for help and shouting for help. Throw anything that floats. So it could be a ring buoy if there's something around. Maybe it's a football. Maybe it's an oar. Maybe it's a large branch. Anything that can float will help that person that's in the water. We had an incident on the island quite recently where somebody was drowning, and whilst there was things around that could have been thrown to the person, nobody did. And unfortunately, the person ended up drowning. So remember, there's ways that you can help someone by not entering the water yourself with no danger, but still be a benefit to them. Guys, that's the end of the talk. We'd left some time at the end, 10 minutes, to take any questions. Fiona, I know that some of the students have been very kindly in touch to talk about mapping the local life rings, and you passed on that information. But also people had inquired about how they could become lifeguards. So Water Safety Ireland, they're the people that administer the recruitment and training of lifeguards on the island. And if you go onto their website, you can see where your local branch is. In Northern Ireland, we run the lifeguard service, and we run a recruitment campaign every year. And you can apply for those positions if you're over 18. But it's a really rewarding career, and you can travel internationally with it. And the lifeguard service that we run in Northern Ireland, England, Scotland, and Wales is a big part of our life-saving work. But principally, go on in Ireland, it's the recruitment is done by the councils. And if you go on the Irish Water Safety website, you'll see where your local branch is to get the training for it, and then it's a process of applying when the council jobs come up for selection, and that's typically done between February and April. Varies by month for each council. Is there any more questions coming in on the chat there?
Very quiet this morning, except for saying it's a very important topic. I think everybody is still kind of like coming back from a lovely bank holiday weekend and still dreaming that they were at the coastal lines or inland. As you said, like, you know, we're everywhere now. Lakes are becoming more popular, and so are rivers. So it's really, really important to know water safety all around. And it's, you know, from doing our webinars before and doing the life buoys, you know, knowing where they are and mapping them out is such an interesting thing for the students to get involved in as well. But there's, with technology, like the difference between having this chat with yourselves there today and the one that we did last year at the start of the year, the technology has come up as well, that we're now mentioning, like, you know, how to get quick access from your mobile without having to dial 999 or 112 as well. So, you know, the difference between an Android and an Apple.
Yeah, and like the Apples of the latest generation now have got satellite coverage. So where those mobile blank spots are, the satellite coverage is kicked in, and Vodafone are similarly planning to roll out a service to cover those black spots. But it's always something to just bear in mind. I live in a predominantly rural area, rural county, and our coverage around the lakes and the rivers and a lot of our isolated beaches is pretty poor. And so again, whenever you're thinking about where to go, you're always going to factor in, is the mobile signal good there? Loads of people unfortunately get into danger in quarries in these periods of hot weather because it might be the closest body of water to you, but that doesn't mean that's the safest. Quarries tend to again have very little phone signal, and they're also isolated. So when people do get into trouble there, it takes a long time for the emergency services to arrive. One of the reasons that lakes and rivers account for so many drownings is we don't have lifeboats on our rivers, our canals, certainly not in our quarries. And we've got limited lifeboats, whether it be RNLI or community lifeboats that are on our inland lakes. And we, again, don't have a huge number of lifeguards in rivers and inland areas. And they tend to be more isolated. When you're at the coast, there's always people out for a walk, maybe doing a water sport. So there's someone that's keeping an eye on you if you might get into trouble.
Yeah. And the difference, also the difference in the water from south coast to the north coast. East is not as rough as the north, let's say, at most times. But
and it's funny because year round on the Atlantic coasts, our water temperatures are relatively mild compared to the east coast and the inland waters like rivers and lakes. So typically the water temperature on our Atlantic seaboards can be between 8 and 10 degrees because of the Gulf Stream current. Whereas on the East Coast, it can be a little bit less in the winter and then even less again on our rivers and lakes. Now, occasionally we get what we call marine heat waves, but the majority of the time, the Atlantic, and certainly for most of the year, is actually warmer than the Irish Sea, and the Irish Sea is warmer again than our rivers and our lakes. Remember, our rivers and our lakes are all fed by mountain water generally, so that when those snow and everything starts melting and coming downstream, that's why they're principally colder. But fresh water as well is less buoyant than salt water, and also rivers always have a current on them. So, when people fall in at a riverbank, they generally get swept downriver quite quickly. And we have in our big towns, so Limerick, Galway, Dublin, Cork, Sligo, even Letterkenny. There's rivers run through a lot of these towns, canals or whatever. So whenever people are out and about, and maybe in the evenings, and they decide to go for a cooling swim, or they fall in accidentally after a night out, that's where that danger comes in.
Yeah, especially around locks and weirs. I know between around Lucan there in Dublin, there's a massive weir, so there's an underpull as well there. So you're uptied, so you can be pulled under quite quickly. Just think before you jump in, I suppose.
It's always, like I say, just always checking the water that's beneath you. We have kind of a few golden rules, and that's always have a means of flotation. So it can be a life jacket if you're going boating where you're going to be further offshore. So one that you can either manually or automatically inflate, or a buoyancy aid, which is really good for paddleboarding, kayaking. So those foam-filled jackets. Or just general swimming. Always have that means of flotation, always have that means of communication, so that phone in the waterproof pouch. Maybe it's a VHF radio when you're going boating. It can be a whistle as well, like I said, low tech, doesn't need a battery or anything. So your means of flotation, your means of communication, always check the weather and the tides. It's so easy to do these days. And you're principally looking for those strong winds, the fog, thunder and lightning, maybe excess rainfall for all the reasons I talked about earlier, increased river flow, poor water quality at the coast in heavy rainfall. And if you see someone in trouble, always call 999 or 112. Remember, when you're traveling overseas, that number can vary. So in America, they have 911, for instance. 112 is the pan-European number, and 999 works in the UK and Ireland. So always, just wherever you end up on your travels, check the emergency contact number.
So generally, if we were on our holidays in Spain or France or anywhere,
112.
112 will work as well.
112 will work.
Really,
and like I say, never enter the water yourself. Always look for something that can float, you can throw it to, and we'll always want to know the who, what, and the where. Okay, but the operator will guide you through that. And just the final easy one, like I said. Like I said, the easy one is just always let someone know where you're going and when you'll be back. Those are our golden rules.
Yeah, well, as always, I always am fascinated with the updates and everything with the water safety, and it's so important to, even if you know how to swim, don't jump in, because you're double drowning. Chances of double drowning is higher. The ring buoys, if there's not one around or a rope around, find something to throw a long distance, not to hit the person's head. They're already having a bad day, but yeah, no, it's so important to stay safe, and especially with the nice weather. There is something I know, like, you know, with the lads, like you were saying, like men, boys, they tend to show off a little bit more and take risks a little bit more. If they're jumping in, like showing off, let's say at a canal, or they're messing around beside a canal and one falls in, and they're wearing, like, you know, big puffer jackets. They wear winter jackets quite like all year round, almost, or no jackets. So depending, they're either going to be freezing or they're going to be overheated. When they jump in, like, clothes can weigh you down as well. So with the float to live, does that come into anything, like, you know?
Yeah, so it's an interesting point that you make there, because we have researched this, and the beauty of float to live is anyone can float. You don't need to be able to swim. Anyone can float. Every single human can float, right? Now, whenever you fall in with your clothes, regardless of where you're wearing a heavy jacket or you're just wearing a pair of swimming trunks or whatever, we always say fight that instinct to thrash around.
You almost literally waited the whole entire hour for your internet to glitch there.
Sorry. A
couple of seconds.
The short answer is, right, when you fall in with your clothes, it traps pockets of air which can act as buoyancy. Okay. So if you float on your back, those little pockets of air remain intact. When you thrash around, okay, as most people do, if they don't know float to live, they'll panic, thrash around. That disrupts those pockets of air. Okay, so you don't have that buoyancy there.
Okay,
but look, guys, we've hit the 11 o'clock mark there. All the stuff that I talked about today is covered on our website, rnli.org/safety. You'll see all the information I've just given you. If you're a teacher and you want to explore some of the stuff that we've done here in greater detail, rnli.org/education. There's a load of free lesson plans, resources there that you can work through with your classes. Guys, have a brilliant...
All else fails, you can hop onto tyhub.ie and find the RNLI on there as well. So for a quick access.
Thank you, everybody, for joining today. And thank you, Fiona, for hosting TY Hub. Absolutely brilliant resources. We love working with you and all your events that you organize. So thank you very much.
Thanks so much for jumping on board. And Nadia, welcome to the RNLI Education.
Thank you.
It's good for your first one. We have got another one coming up in September with yourselves again. So for the TY coordinators and students and anybody that's interested in water safety, check us out in September. Pop over to the events calendar on TY Hub and you will see all of our lovely webinars coming up. And if I'm not wrong, there are some talks that we can the RNLI can provide to schools as well. So
if you want an in-person talk, we can facilitate that if we've got a staff or volunteer nearby.
Perfect. Thanks a lot. So thanks again, and we'll catch you after the summer holidays.
Have a great summer, guys. Thank you.
Yeah.
Bye.